All right, everybody, we are live. I am Dr. Torri J. I'm your founder and CEO of the Fatherless Generation Foundation. I'm going to give people a couple of minutes. I know people, they were ready for this one. You got a lot of likes and a lot of love concerning this conversation.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to give people just a few minutes to get on because I'm sure their timers told them I was coming on. But I see them. The numbers will slowly go up. Where's Ryan? I need Ryan to share it in his group. Ryan Powell, when you jump on here, share this in your group because you're going to want to. The unmarried father is going to want to hear this conversation. We are right now going to have a dialogue and a conversation with Keith Sagers. We're going to really dig into how he went through this journey of being alienated and then having an up and down relationship with his father. Paul said, we're doing it right now. See, all I got to do is say it. They get it done. I appreciate them.
Put it out there.
They got a larger following than I do, Keith. So men need to hear this conversation because we're going to talk about the ups and downs that he had after being alienated and then kind of reconnecting at a young age, but then really only establishing that relationship with his father once he was 25 years old and navigating that now as an adult man and what that was like to journey through that. I want to give a little bit of bio on Keith. Yes, I did look you up. Keith and I were introduced by a powerful young lady that I so adore in Atlanta, Marquetta. Yeah, we're calling you out tonight. So you'll definitely, I'm sure she's going to jump on because she definitely gave us like the sign, like she was very proud that we were on here together. And once I got on the phone with him, I knew he was someone that you guys needed to hear his story. Not only hear his story, but his energy and the journey that he's gone through, because it will not only give you hope for your own situation, but it'll help you understand how your children are feeling and what they're navigating. And Keith is a native of Atlanta, Georgia. He holds enough leadership positions and has been in leadership enough that I can't even list it all. I know he's been a professor. I know he has a master's. I know he has a lot of good things that have happened for him in his life. And a lot of that we focus on when we say our children are just fine. They're successful. They have all of these degrees and they're blah, blah, blah. But I want you to connect to where he is emotionally. I wanted you to connect to him with some of the journeys that he's gone through. Although he had all of that, just like myself, he still had some issues concerning identity, insecurity, self-esteem. And so I am glad to and proud to announce and introduce to my platform and my following, Keith Sagers. So Keith, give the part that I didn't give. Like, tell people who you are other than what I put on here.
Sure. And Torri, thank you again for allowing me to be on the show. Again, my name is Keith Sagers. As Torri said, I'm a native of Atlanta. I'm also the president and CEO of the RS Empowerment Group, and I'm founder of the Empowerment Lab. It's really an organization or community really designed to uplift, to build, and more or less transform this world one empowered person at a time. And so, that's kind of my passion, my purpose work, and really being able to share my story to impact and to, again, inspire, empower, and then transform people and give them permission to tell their own. So again, Torri, listen, I'm super excited to be here with you.
Well, I can't wait to get the feedback on this one either, because I know this is about to be powerful. I even told people in my advertisement, I guess you can call it, my post about it, bring your tissue, because I'm sure there's going to be those moments. There's going to be those moments. And so let's get into this, because I don't want to delay any longer. So Keith, you went through this journey of growing up fatherless. And in growing up fatherless, how long would you say that you were fatherless before you really recognized, I don't have a daddy in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think to kind of help answer that question I think it's important to kind of understand the context in which that was. And my father left when I was 3. And my mother and my father had a very volatile relationship. I have an older sister, and she was kind of set to be my protector, right, through a lot of this stuff. And so my father left. It was an abusive kind of situation. And, give you an example, we moved around so much. Like, I went to probably 5 or 6 different elementary schools by the time I was in the 3rd grade. And that dynamic, my father left not knowing anything about where he is and what he's doing, there became this fear that my mother had, and kind of prompted that fear in me. And so it got to a place where I was so angry, even as a child, right, that I didn't want to have a relationship with him. Even when he decided to, he wanted to come back, and I was probably 10 years old at the time, and he would kind of pop in and pop out. I'm sure you guys and just some of the listeners had fathers kind of like that. They kind of pop in and pop out. They make promises, don't deliver, right? And it kind of reinforces narrative that I grew up with. And so, a lot of that kind of happened. And for years, I had this longing for wanting to, have a father figure. I wanted to have my dad. But at the same time, I hated who he was. Right? And it was so bad to a point where literally, someone would say, "Hey, Keith, you look just like your dad," and I would cringe. Like I can remember even at 5 and 6 and 7, 8 years old, I would literally cringe. And that level of hate kind of translated a little deeper for me, because, even when someone said his name, it was a pain point. But the problem was I also carried his name.
Oh, you're right? Jew. Oh, come on, somebody. Okay. Yeah. Keep talking.
Yeah. And so, right. So even to this day, Keith is my middle name. My mother started calling me Keith at very, that's what they called me from day one, right? And the people who know me was like, oh, they know, my first name is Rodney, right? I have no problem with that, right? So my first name is Rodney. And it was funny growing up because most of the kids knew kind of my background, my best friends. And so it was like, oh, don't let Rodney come out. When Rodney comes out, it's a whole nother person. But Keith is who I was. Now, in that space where you find out that you have this anger towards your father and this hate towards your father, and it also kind of manifests in your own life, and that turns into a kind of a hatred for your own self, not even realizing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and having a mother who kind of reinforced that lovingly, right? But out of her own fear, when I would do something, her way to get me back in line would be just like your father, right? Knowing that I had the hate for him, and it would literally, it would correct, right? I would shift, because my entire motivation that I realized actually as we kind of moved through my entire life, my motivation for success was not to be like that guy.
See, that we didn't have talk on the or that conversation on the talk we had last week or 2 weeks ago. Yeah. See. Okay, you done touched on so many things. I didn't have to take notes already. Because
question one.
Yeah, no, but that's good, because this whole idea of dad popping in and out, not delivering on promises. I think we forget that our fathers are human too, and we forget that our fathers are just as insecure about their fatherhood as we are about them fathering us, right? Especially in situations like that. Oh, my husband's jumping on here. Please share, people. Please share. I think, well, I told them to share initially. My husband's like, share, and then he tags some people. Please share. He's always on cue. But it's that insecurity that we don't know as a child, because we see men as supermen. We see them as strong, and there's nothing ever that's going to hurt you and penetrate your armor, right? But when it comes to the babies, it's kryptonite to Superman.
Yeah.
And if he felt any type of rejection from you or any type of pushback from your mother, that could create the in and out, the lack of delivery. Now, there are some men who just can't, deliver. But I want to also add another part to the narrative that I know now after doing this work. There's a real fear and insecurity, especially after you've been absent. How do I get back in here? How am I supposed to? Is he going to embrace me? They're having the same experience. I always tell people, fatherless children and their fathers are having the exact same experience. Their hearts are having the exact same experience. Then you talked about wanting to have a dad, but hating him all at the same time. Hating him. What about him did you hate, Keith?
So,
we left at 3. So what did you know?
again, I only knew the narrative that I was told, and the only person who was in my circle was firsthand experience was my mother. And you notice that, you know, anytime as you grow up, you realize that no two parents are perfect, right? You know, as a kid, a mother is the epitome of perfection, right? And you lean on every word, and you know, and it's absolutely. But as you grow up, you start to realize and look and like, that wasn't right. That that's ooh, and right, and then you start to realize and understand the level of trauma and dysfunction that even they grew up in as children themselves. And you know, for a
That
lot
they
of reasons,
never healed before being
having
parents.
never correct.
Yes.
And what you tend to find is that, you know, trauma and dysfunction, it attracts each other. And so you wind up attracting this kind of the same kind of situation that is always going to be, again, could be a volatile situation, which is what mine was. You know, my father was a brilliant man. Like, I didn't know, I'm telling you, I didn't realize a lot of this stuff about my dad until I was way into my 30s, right? And like uncovering stuff like, you know, my father was 16 when he went to Tuskegee College, 16 years old, right? The child was brilliant. But it was there where he got involved with some older guys, and it kind of went left, right? And so drugs and some other things kind of came into place. But that's where he also met my mother, right?
Gotcha.
And so out of her dysfunction, again, they're trying to save each other. Even at that point, it was a bad situation. So hearing this from my mother, that my father is this, you know, you might as well just say this evil monster per se, right? Because of everything that she went through with him, and the pain and the whole 9 yards in that moment of time. And still to this day, we'll talk about more about him, but it's still to this day, some of that still carries on with my mother, right? And it's amazing the kind of stuff we hold on to that we never heal from, but we say we do. Give it to God, right? God ain't trying to hear that. God expects you to do some work before you take it. He expects you he expects some things to happen, right? But you know, and so trying to figure out who I am, what's my identity. You know, as a young kid, like searching for this identity because I had no foundation. You know, as a father that affirms a son, right? As a father that gives a son his place.
Yeah.
And who he is, right? And so I have in my name, it should mean something. So when I hear my name during that time, that name meant pain. It meant failure. It meant fear. It meant, right? All of these negatives, right? All of these negative associations that was connected to my name. And it was,
also,
you know.
And also, you were carrying your mother's emotions and pain concerning your father, which creates you're taking on her level of hate and disdain for him. So I had a very conversation with my own mother this week, not about my father. I won't get into the details of it, but my mother has a very challenging name for my brother's father. So much so the family only knows him by this derogatory name. They don't know this man's real name. They do not. And I had to tell her, how do you think my brother feels when you walk around calling his father this name? And she even tried to propose to me, well, I don't even know his real name. I said, you don't know this man's real name? I know his real name. How do you not know it? And that was just this week. And I had to know about my brother, and you're saying very much so what I was trying to say to my mother and help her understand. You've got to call his dad. My brother is what, 38? 38? And I'm like, he's only known his father as this name. And it's just not right when dealing with children, because they take on your emotions. And if my dad is this monster, let's call it monster, then what does that make me? And that's that shaky foundation you're referring to. Now,
that's correct.
Because you said a mouthful. And then one of the things you said that I'm like, okay, you said your mother was reinforcing this narrative lovingly. How do you feel like that was lovingly? What do you mean?
Because when you get this, you're gonna be just like your dad. You look at it as, looking at this as from a child's perspective, this is correction, right? This is discipline. And you know your mother loves you. And when she says it, she comes back and she gives you a hug or something of that nature later on. So it's looked at as more, it's your discipline. So instead of pulling out the switch of the belt, right, it becomes, that's the trigger, right? It's the piece that shifts you. So it feels lovingly because it wasn't painful from the standpoint of physically painful, but emotionally, you know, as a child, having that kind of, again, destructive, just feelings and energy towards a person, it was bound to fall apart, right?
Yes,
Like,
and it all came from her.
Yeah, well, you mentioned, like, you know, carrying her fear, carrying her anger, carrying all of these things. You know, I do a talk with a lot of people, and I call it, you know, kids are not built to carry your baggage, right?
Not.
Because we put so much on these on kids, expecting them to carry grown-up stuff that we should never be carrying ourselves personally, even as adults.
Yeah.
But our kids carry this stuff, and so me as a son wanted to, you know, I'm the man of the house, right? And so it got to a point where I was so conditioned, like, Mom, you don't even have to drop the baggage. Let me just take it out of your hands, right? And so it was me coming in trying to save the day and picking up everybody's baggage so my mother wouldn't have to worry about this baggage, but that was never mine to carry.
Okay. Pause. That's a real pause moment. We call this in the communities I'm in parental alienation. It happens often within households. And we just say, my baby mama won't let me see my kids. Or, you know, as a kid, Keith is hearing conversations and being told things where his father is this and that. And don't be like your father. Oh, discipline. Oh, you're acting like your dad. That's alienation tactics. That is what happens when you are getting into the mind of your children and establishing ground. You're like digging up ground that maybe 3 years old, you have some memory of some sort. Maybe it's one or two with your dad, right? But now she's uprooted any of those memories and created a narrative within your heart and mind that keeps you at bay. And it keeps you trying to figure out, do I engage or don't I engage? And if I engage, how's my mother going to feel? And then even once I engage, is he really going to live up to what I think he can live up to? Or is he going to really live up to what she says he is? And it's all of these emotions. And so the dads who are watching and who will watch this, I want you to recognize that there's a lot of stuff going on. And Keith just hit on it. He's carrying the baggage of his mother, but he's also carrying the sins of his father all at the same time without knowing it. Because when we without even knowing it, because I just did a podcast on the soul of a fatherless man. And I'm specifically talking about when you make a little boy the man of the house. And then he grows up because he's already been in a relationship with his mother for 20 years. But now women, we want him to be in a relationship with us and be accountable and responsible and carry our hearts and our baggage and our stuff. He's been doing it so long that he is not interested. And then he may enter into it with resentment because maybe he got you pregnant and y'all decided, you know, there's all these things tied to it. And when we do not acknowledge the hurt from being the man of the house, we're walking in, ladies, you are walking into a ticking time bomb and you don't even know it. So Keith, I want to fast forward to 25, because that's the age you told me where you started, you actually reunite with your father. And in reuniting with him, like fully, like where you're ready to, you're not in and out, he's not in and out, you're not playing double dutch, right? This is where you're locking this relationship in, although you're scared. What was that first moment like for you?
So, you know, there are multiple conversations that happen over a period of years.
Absolutely.
And I remember that there was this one conversation, and I'll never forget this actually. I was in the parking lot at work, and I was talking to my dad. And the conversation specifically was centered around dad, like all of this stuff that happened in the past. Like all of these things that you did to mom, all these things that you did to us, all of these things, you created this situation where, we struggled so much. And here I am, like I'm successful. Like I'm trying to prove, like, hey, Dad, look, I'm a college professor at 25, right? Like, Dad, I'm gonna show you how to do this stuff. I'm gonna show you, what it's like. I'm gonna show you how to be a real father to my boys and a husband. I'm gonna show you all of this stuff, right? And I was like, but just tell me, like, why did that happen, right? Why did it have to be like this, right? All I wanted was a relationship with you, right? And at this point, my father, he's been married, again, right? Matter of fact, he's been married multiple times, and he's had a child in the second marriage and then a child in the third marriage, right? So all of this kind of jumbled up together, and it's funny because when I look at even the women he married, they all were like my mom in some way, right? And I'm telling you,
what were the similarities? I'll just ask now. What were the similarities that you saw?
Not just in appearance, right? I mean, clearly in appearance, with the exception of one, but clearly in appearance, demeanor. My father was this extremely charismatic, charming kind of guy, and people literally fall in love with him. Don't get me wrong. My father had a good heart. Problem is, he had way too many demons that he couldn't get over. Right.
Yeah.
And my father, like he wanted to be a minister, right? He wanted to be a preacher. But his past and his demons, he just couldn't overcome them. And so there's, again, you mentioned this early, all this regret and shame. And so when he met people who could also be easily manipulated. Right?
He had the charm, he had the gift. Yeah.
He had the gift.
Yeah.
He had the gift.
And some people see it as a gift, some people see it as a curse, but nonetheless, I'll call it a gift. Yeah.
I look at it as a gift, and
right, because you're a speaker, you're a motivational. Yeah.
And a lot of that reminds me of him, but it's about how you use your superpower, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's so my dad, that conversation in the car, we sat there for like an hour and a half, and he was trying to explain that, Keith, not everything that you were told is true. But I had a hard time because I've had 25, 26 years of being indoctrinated with one narrative, right?
Look, I'm gonna lean on this one.
So, yeah, so it's hard to decipher, because again, a mother's word is gold, right? You bank on that, what she says. And yes, her experiences were real, but guess what? There's also context, right? There's also, and again, it wasn't until I got older that a lot of this stuff started to come out. And so that was the very first conversation that we had, and he started to share and tell me, he was like, this is what happened, and this is how these things were, and this was never, what I wanted, and I wanted to do more, and I just couldn't at the time, and I wanted to be there. And now, he's been trying to come back, throughout the years, and wanting a relationship. And as you mentioned before, there's this fear, there's this shame, there's this, being apprehensive a bit, right? Engaging with your own kids just because of the circumstances and the situation that you're in. And so I get that now as an adult, right? I can understand a person's feelings and emotions. And I think that was one of my gifts as a child. I was always someone who felt emotion. I think that's why I was able to just pick up the bass, because I knew when my mother was in this place. Even when she was smiling, I could feel the pain behind it, right?
Right.
And so still to this day, that's one of the things that I appreciate most about being able to connect with people. So my father, I got married, and and it was one of those situations where my mother couldn't exist within the same space as my dad. And so when I wanted to build a relationship, I could tell that my mother was, it burned her up, right? Like I would feel the disgust, right? I would feel the sense of like, why would you
disapproval?
thank you. That's what I'm looking at, this disapproval, right? And my mother, she remarried. And that was some people call it bonus ed. My stepfather, that was my dad growing up, right? So he played a role in my upbringing. But there were things that my mother wouldn't even allow him to do. Again, this is a lot of out of her own, not even knowing that she's doing some of these things, right?
Wow.
We repeat cycles that we grow up in.
Yeah.
She grew up in cycles too, just like a lot of Black families. And so you intertwine that, but you also add in things like mental health.
Yeah.
Right. You add in things like depression, anxiety, and all of these kinds of things that we just don't discuss. Right. These childhoods, these secrets, and the trauma and the baggage, and you collect all that stuff, and then you carry it out, and then your kids kind of wind up in this hodgepodge of a functional reality, I guess, in a sense. It's really just dysfunctional. But so I got married. I wanted my father to be a part of the wedding. Like, we got to that place. I said, Dad, I want you to be a part of the wedding. Again, disapproval, right? I remember even on my invitations, you write your whole name on the invitations. And my mom was like, you want to put Keith?
Okay, let's pause before you get into this wedding. Let's go back there. Even Keith is not your full government name. And so when we were talking about identity, because we're going to go back to this wedding, we were talking about identity.
Mm-hmm.
You have even distanced yourself from the identity of being basically a blueprint junior.
Yeah.
In that, the second, whatever your part is.
Yeah.
And wait a minute. And then when Rodney would show up, people always associated that with, oh, that's not the dude you want to even meet. Like, that's going to be something different. You got to help me navigate this part of it.
Okay, so let me share this. I think this may help too. A child looking for identity will seek to connect anywhere he can with anybody, right? Because he's searching for who can he mimic and who can he imitate, right? He's looking for something. I like Sagers is my last name. I would literally almost disassociate myself with that and take on my stepfather's last name. He's Puerto Rican, right? His name is Aguayo, Fred Aguayo. That's Pop. But as a child, like, I want everybody to know this was my dad, right? This is the guy that I want people to see.
Okay.
I used to even be like, yeah, I'm half Puerto Rican, like, I'm lying, but you know what I'm saying? It played, but
it might work a little bit. I can see it.
You never know, right? Yeah. Well, I don't have a hair no more, but but it's having that level of identity. My mom was like, back on the invitation, was like, you don't want to put Keith, or you don't want to put your stepfather's last name on here. Now, he never legally adopted me, but you see, like, even as a grown person, it's just like there's still this thing. And what I come to find out is that people tell this narrative so much that they're afraid to actually see anything other than that narrative. And so when I try to coach people, I'm like, listen, you have to figure out a way to even divorce yourself from that story.
Yes.
Right? Like, you have to divorce yourself from that story, that narrative. And that's what I had to do.
Living that story.
That story.
Yeah.
And my father and I became extremely close. Like, I began to really understand who he was as a person. I understood who he was then, like who he was at that moment versus who he was when I was 3. They're two different people.
Yeah.
I mean, he's basically a kid when he had me still, right? But as a child, I look at this grown man and I look at him when I'm older, and they look like they're supposed to be like the same person. They're not.
They're not. But let me ask this, because there was a moment, because I'm telling you, there are people who are now going through this, who will eventually go through this, and people are just wishing this was their moment. And that's why I want to keep kind of going through stages. A lot of times when people are reunited and they reconnect with their children, the first thing they want to do is tell them what happened. And then in telling them what happened, slams mama, which is going to get you some backlash or them to disappear. What I like about your journey is it seems like you initiated that conversation, and he waited for you to initiate the conversation so that he could then lead in gently with what was really happening.
Yeah.
How do you help someone understand what that was like for you to be able to initiate it versus him inundating you? Like you said, your mother did. Your mother indoctrinated you, and now you're coming over here and they want to indoctrinate you with this thing. What was that like versus the other thing, I guess is what I want to know.
Yeah. So I'll tell you this, what that was like and how that even happened, really, again, I have to give that to my mother. That credit, because my mother knew there were some things that she couldn't give me. And so one of the things that was really cool about my mom, she's very resourceful. At this point, she's a businesswoman. I mean, very successful doing her thing. She was somebody, again, that I looked at and I said, you know, she's a model of what I want to be. She went and got her back, you know, of course she got a graduate early, her degree, but she got a master's degree and she was doing all those other things. I said, I'm gonna do what you do. Right. And so I started, again, I'm looking for a place that I can build from. I'm gonna do what you do, Mom. So I went and I got my master's, and you know, I was 24, I got my master's and was moving on. But the greatest thing my mother did for me, and this was happening coming out of high school, because again, we all have defining moments in our lives. High school graduation was one of those moments for me because I didn't know what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And my mother, again, being very resourceful and having resources and knowing a lot of people, she would expose me to different people that I would sit and learn from. And I'll never forget, like, there was this guy, this guy made $100,000 a month, right? Legally. And I'm 17 years old, and he was like, Keith, listen, man, you know, if you made the kind of money I made, would you care what anybody, you know, thought about you? Would you do whatever it took to get it? Would you, you know, what, like, the answer was yes, right? But it was this kind of exposure and this whole concept around professional and personal development. Like, I went on my own journey that actually opened my eyes to start to look at things from a different lens in my own life. So I was able to I was almost like I was getting counseling and therapy through my personal development stuff. I mean, I was like 18 years old listening to like cassette tapes of like Tony Robbins and Les Brown and you know, at this age, right? And it just opened my eyes to a lot of different psychology and how people think. So now I'm kind of looking back, and it gave me this confidence to say, Dad, no, I'm not gonna wait for you. Let's deal with this. Right?
No, I like that.
Let's deal with
that. Because I'm gonna tell you, there are a lot of men who just jump in because they have been alienated, they have been told, and they know that their children have been told a lot, and so they want to jump in immediately. And not all adult children are ready for that conversation because the indoctrination of their mother. And like you said a moment ago, our mothers are everything. They are up here. I always say we have made our mothers our deities. And when we do that, nothing you can say. You can't, don't touch mama. Once I'm open and I've been around you enough, now I can hear the story. But I have to be able to let my guard down. You've got to give me time to do that. And in that process, that's what you're waiting. And the other part that I want to tell dads on here while we're listening and talking about listening to Keith tell his story is you have to recognize that Keith's father was also dealing with the fact that he had left when Keith was 3. And so he's missed all this time. And in some ways, he probably wanted to make up for that time, but he had to pace himself because you're not dealing with a 3-year-old anymore. Now you're dealing with a 25-year-old. And you can't make up that time, gentlemen. You have to start with where you are, and you have to kind of go at Keith's pace, at the child's pace, which is challenging.
It's challenging
for the father.
Let me say this to dads, because I think it's really important for fathers to even understand this with sons, is that when you're absent, like, you leave your child to vulnerable. Yeah. Like, people prey on them and you know, and those kinds of things. And so it's having this kind of relationship and not being afraid is like, you know, okay, I did some stuff, right? I could take responsibility, but responsibility, you know, almost all by itself can be very depressing, right?
Yeah.
You know, and so when we look at holistically, it's about taking ownership.
Yeah.
And my dad started to take ownership of the situation. So when we had the conversation, Torri, he never said a bad thing about my mother.
He owned his part.
He owned his part.
And
And
I
I
can,
went back and I went back and told my mom. I went back and told my mom, and she was kind of like, it was like dismissed, right? Because again, there's a narrative that we're used to, and so this narrative puts us in the position that, you know, people will almost feel sorry for us. And it's not what we want, not what we mean, right? It's not how we, but we don't know any other story to tell, because
it's,
that story has been indoctrinated in them too.
yeah, it's the manipulation in order to control the situation and also the narrative.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you are stirring up hate in your sons and your daughters. I know for a fact that angry little boys become raging men and angry little girls become raging women. That's why you can see on TV right now, you can turn on any channel and watch Black women fight each other over the smallest thing, because they are raging women. And now you get paid to be raging. Now the crazier I am on this show, the more you're going to pay me. Absolutely, sign me up, because I'm this anyway. I'm fuming and I'm burning anyway. And I know people are like, what is she talking about? Reality TV is full of fatherless and motherless individuals.
Yeah.
And that's why it's entertaining. That's why you get to see them do this, because those who solicit them for their role, because it's not reality fully, they know the challenges and the brokenness they have. And they know all they have to do is light a match and put it in the room, and that thing's going to blow. And that's what we have to get to when we are fatherless. We have to get to the healing. So I want to get to the point, Keith, when we're talking about you going for 29, 25 years old. Now you're getting married. So I'm going back to the wedding. So mom is even trying to get you to change your name on the invitation. Oh, mothers, I love y'all. I do. But we have to, we got to own our stuff too. And that's why they don't keep, they go, well, Torri, Dr. Torri, you don't have to throw mamas under the bus in order to help fathers. Actually, I do. I got to slide you under the bus gently. I'll give you a skateboard. I'll give you some with wheels on it, and I'll make sure that the bus doesn't fully run you over. But I need us to understand as women the part that we play in this dynamic. It's the little things. It's the little nudges that Keith's mother would give him, the little discipline moments she would give him. Oh, we're going to just call you Keith, and we're not going to call you Rodney. And then now changing the name even on the invitation when you're a grown man. And do you want to take your stepfather's or your bonus dad's last name? What were you feeling?
You know, honestly conflicted.
Okay.
Why? Because again, I'm at a place where I'm still building a relationship with my biological father, and my stepfather's here, and we have a great relationship too. And I felt like I'm betraying one or the other, right? And I have my mother kind of making me lean this way, and that became the kind of chasm, right, between just that whole dynamic. I can't even tell you how stressful that piece was. And it was my wife who was like, Keith, like the only reason that wasn't on there is because she's like, I'm not your father, not gonna be your stepfather's last name. Like, this is what it is. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Forget that. And let's move. Like, it almost had to be like a separation in a sense, like almost like a divorcing of your mother, right?
No.
And again, like literally,
yes,
like literally, and that's what has to happen. I mean, and that's a difficult thing when that's all you know. So again, you created this deity of who your mother is, and so that word carries so much weight that you're conflicted, like going through basic stuff that shouldn't be an issue. Even in my own marriage, like, it shouldn't be an issue. And so, we resolved all of that. And my dad was in my wedding. It was a great situation. We were both there. I had pictures with both my dads standing next to me, right? And it was I'll never forget that. It was one of those, moments on fire kind of moment, right? Because like I realized, like, I have two people that I love, that I wanted to be in my life, right? And so again, my father and I were still working on our relationship. That was an olive branch. Like, I want you to know how much I want you a part of my life too.
I want to say this to you because it's what you said about divorcing your mother. A lot of men, I don't think, get this. They read the Bible and it says leave and cleave. And that's kind of a moment, right? And you're like, well, how do you do that exactly? Especially when this is your situation. That's challenging. It sounds easy, right? You're reading it and it sounds easy. But to give the analogy that I want to give people this analogy, because the fact that you said it, I'm like, whoo, not many men understand that, Keith. Most men still try to, and it's not that you can't love your mother and provide for your mother and do these things for your mother, but where your heart is in carrying her baggage and feeling responsible in the way that you grew up feeling responsible for her had to be severed. It reminds me of something that when I was reading it recently in my Bible, because people know I'm always going to hit something spiritual on here, always. And even Jesus himself, although he was raised by his mother and his bonus daddy, here we go, because it's not really his daddy. And we then get to a point where it's time for Jesus to perform a miracle. He didn't think it was necessarily time, but his mother thought it was time. So then she's in the back, maneuvering, manipulating, finagling, putting her finger in it. And he looked at her and said, woman, what does this have to do with you? And we have to recognize that that was even the moment Jesus divorced his mother and was able to walk into his calling from that moment forward. So I will say this to even fatherless sons who are watching this. One of the reasons you have not walked into your calling and fully walked into where God has called you is because you have not divorced the emotions and the feelings and the baggage of your own mother pertaining to your father. And when you are able to do that, you will literally launch and be able to turn water into wine. You will be able to heal the sick and recover those who are blind. But until you get to that place, you will find yourself forever struggling because you are stuck in this, behind this veil in a sense. And you're stuck in a marriage that God never put you in anyway. And that, and so when you said that, I was like, say it, hit that. Because I even forgot that until you said it. I even forgot that revelation that God gave me reading that.
You just made that real for a lot of people, right?
Yes.
And no, I'm serious. And I hope people are uncomfortable right now because these are the kind of courageous conversations you have to have some kind of breakthrough, right? Like, you have to be willing to have these kind of courageous conversations and be honest.
Yeah.
I think that the hardest thing for people to do is simply be honest. Honest with themselves.
Yeah.
Like, just in general, just period. So I appreciate you saying that. I really do.
That's a powerful moment, Keith. Right before your wedding, you are able to divorce your mother to walk into the holy matrimony God has called you to. Yeah. That's powerful. And I won't even say a lot. There are men who aren't able to do that before that moment.
Yeah.
And so they carry all of that into their marriage and then wonder why they're having so many issues. I think it's something that the church has to acknowledge and we have to start talking about, because it's it's easy to read scripture and say leave and cleave. But what does that mean exactly? When I've already been living in dysfunction, when I've already been living in cycles and craziness, how do I leave? You want me to abandon my mother for this woman that I've known a few years?
Something, and that is so foreign, right? Because we've been living in this dysfunction. Like, oh my God, like you said, what does that even look like? How am I supposed to do that?
How am I supposed to do that? And that's, for me, I'm like, oh my God, it's got to be hard to be a man in that situation. I'm not even going to pretend that I would think that it's easy, because mothers and daughters have their own complicated relationships. And I talk about mine all the time. So, and it's all dysfunctional, even on that level. So we have a hard time, even when our mothers are competitive and jealous and do us harm and are toxic. We have a hard time as women stepping away and divorcing that and not bringing that into our marriage. So it's on both ends. I'm not here blaming you. It's on both sides of this thing, because dysfunction and cycles are real when you grow up without a father Or let's
Yeah.
say you didn't, but he had a bonus. Keith had a bonus dad. But how about our parents grow up without a father, or the dysfunction of our parents or our grandparents, right? Who lived together but didn't sleep in the same room.
Mm.
Extra names that show up on the obituary because there's some extra kids, you know. So come on.
that's about as real as it gets.
Yes.
Right. and not knowing who your father is, not right. Like all of this stuff. These are this is the kind of baggage that you know parents grow up with. They hide because it's their own shame.
Yes.
Right. The kids have no idea why this is going on, but why there's so much dysfunction. But again, it's normal now because they've grown up in it, and all they do is perpetuate it.
Yes.
Right. And they grow up like this. And so so all of these, the kids have all these different motivations. Like for me, like that motivation for me, again, and a lot of the things I've done in my life was that sole motivation of not being like this guy. And that's a hard. I had to think back. I was like, that's an ugly motivation. Like I get it, right?
So it's your success that your mother could tout and say, "Oh, he's amazing."
Oh, this is my baby. Oh, you need 1 second.
Right? Because that's what a lot of mothers do on my page. They say, "Well, my son and my daughter are successful and they have great careers and they have families and they're married and I'm like, but have you checked their heart lately?"
Mm-hmm. I'm telling you, and a lot of people are walking around broken for that reason.
So let's talk about where your heart was, Keith. Where was your heart? Not we got where it was at 10, but now you're married. What age was that? 29-ish?
I was 27 when I got married.
27 when you got married. So here you are getting married. You're conflicted, yes. Now you've established, you stepped away from that whole piece with your mother. Now you're really working on this relationship with your father. But where was your heart initially when this all started? Because I know it's leaps and bounds now. But where was your heart? What were you feeling? I know the identity was scary. The foundation wasn't real. Did mom know any of this stuff?
You know, she knew my want and my need. Like I yearned for that. She knew that. So it was very uncomfortable for her, but it also made me very uncomfortable too. Because at the same time, I'm trying to build relationships. You know, any misstep that my dad would do, it was like, you know, pain. Boom, I give it to him, right? And again, forgetting like he's human. Like and the importance of giving people grace who are actually trying to make changes. You know?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I remember all these times where, you know, and then something happened and my mom in the background basically like, I told you, right? You know, it's you know, and again, it's her trying to protect her son at the same time, but again, out of her own fear and dysfunction. So it always turns out bad that way, right? But I understand it though. I understand it now, right? So my dad, I'll never forget. You know, he would call me every morning. You know, we got to that place. He would call me every morning, just say, "Son, I just want to hear your voice. Make it a great day." Right? That was his thing. I would make it a great day, Keith. Make it a great day.
Wow.
Right? And then I started to learn from him. Like I'm in my late 20s, and I'm starting to learn from him, like getting to know who he actually is as a person, and watching these lessons that I wanted to learn as a child. Like I have very limited, you know, memories of like as a child with my dad, and the only memories that I have that really stand out were like memories of doing things that I love to do now, which is like skate. Like listen, we skate, and I remember as a child going to Piedmont Park in Atlanta, and that was our thing. And we go skating and rolling up into Jelly Bean, which was the skating rink, you know, at the time that everyone would go to. And as a kid, you know, falling down and somebody rolling with my hand, like. But those are memories that I remember because I was with my dad.
Oh wow!
But I have hardly anything else that I can remember of times like we spent. You know, maybe him sending a gift while he was living in Chicago through my grandparents or something of that nature. but I have very limited memories of like just that kind of interaction. So the ones that I do, I hold on to.
Yeah, tight.
Yeah, tight, right? I started learning from him. He started teaching me. I watched his work ethic. My father, he was, like I said, he was a brilliant guy. But again, a lot of stuff, he was, again, battling his own self and trying to figure out how to do things and create and run his own businesses and those kinds of things. Like he tried and he tried and tried and tried. And then, it's funny when he finally found that one thing that worked. Because I watched him over these last few years, he finally found that thing that worked for him. And it was trial and error. And now I look back at it, it was like, you go through things and you keep going until you figure it out.
Yeah.
And I started to understand the reason why he wanted to do this, because he wanted to leave a legacy for his kids. Like out of all the stuff that happened in the past, and now I'm grown, and my sister, she's older, she's grown. I got two younger brothers and sisters, but they're about grown. And now my dad is in their 60s. He's like trying to figure out a legacy. He wants to leave a legacy, and created. He started a business and created and grew it, and it grew it. I mean, it was like for the first time, it was crazy. In my own mind, I was like, wow, I'm proud of him. I didn't tell him. I was like, I'm proud of him, right? And I'm watching him, and everybody's like, Keith, listen, 3 moves. Always think 3 moves. Chess. Always think 3 moves. And he's like anticipated it, and like I'm learning all these lessons at an older age from him, and again, I'm talking more about him, and so again, that separation between he and my mother. Now, my father became got to a place where his business was successful. He found out he had cancer.
Oh wow.
Yeah, stage 4 kidney cancer. And it was crazy because it was like right at that moment where his business started to really take off. And I watched him even through that process of even the chemo and this and that. And every single day he was still out there, even with stage 4 cancer, on ladders. And he had his company was a roof cleaning business, right? It was Atlanta Roof Cleaners. And so they was getting calls from all over the place. It was at that place where it was getting ready to just completely take off. And I watched him, and for when he found out, for that year, I just watched him kind of diminish, right? And you see your dad, you see him, how he was, and you start looking at him, and he's slowly kind of withering, right?
Yeah.
And going through treatment, I'll never forget. He said he called us all together, and he was like, he went, to the last meeting with his doctor. He was like, he said, basically, the doctor said there's not much more they can do. All right. So I'm like, man. But he said, he said, Keith, I don't need you to worry about this. He said, because you've been prepared, right? You're now prepared to do whatever you need to do for this family. And so, it was so August of 2017 passed.
Wow.
And yeah. And I sat by his bedside, right? And I was like, yeah, I'm proud of you. And at that point he couldn't talk, but he looked up, and you could just see it in his eyes, right? It's like, so tissue.
I told you. I knew it was gonna happen. I didn't even know he had cancer. I knew it was gonna happen. I felt it in my. I felt it. You got me tearing up. Let's not let it run over here.
Yeah.
I wanna stay right here, really, because sometimes as fatherless children, we get stuck in a place. I'm the child. He needs to call me. He needs to come find me. My mother told me blah, blah, blah. So you never make the move and then he dies, and you're left with unresolved issues, anger, frustration, still confused with identity as an adult, man and woman.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to tell you from my heart, I had 2.5 years with my father before he passed. And that created all of what you see, this national, soon to be international company would have been if COVID hadn't hit already. Yeah. And now you're hearing Keith say, how long did you have with your dad, like fully engaged relationship before he passed?
I would say right about 2 years.
Right about 2 years. Okay. And so
years.
this 2-year mark that we all seem to get, because I know another lady who got it the same way.
Yeah.
It's worth every bit of the 2 years.
Oh my God. So let me tell you this.
Go ahead, say something.
I'm so grateful because when he passed, there was literally nothing left unsaid between the two of them. Like nothing. And the bond that we had as father and son was stronger than
even mama couldn't break it. Even mama's disappointment and disapproval can't break that even to this day, because I'm gonna tell you something. I had the same experience with my mother. She wouldn't do I told you. She wouldn't do that. But you could tell she was uncomfortable. You could tell. Oh, we come to town.
I told you comes in the mannerisms.
And you would come to my hometown and my dad, and she'd say, okay, I'm gonna drop you off. You go in and see him, and I'm gonna go around the corner, and you need to be back outside. And I'm like, this ain't even a full block. Like, come on.
Wow.
I need a little more time than that, Mom. You know, and it's like, but you could tell it was because she hadn't settled her own score. She hadn't settled her own issues with him. And even our mothers, I'm going to say this to the fatherless sons and daughters first. I just said 2.5 years, 2 years. It was worth every bit of the uncomfortableness and feeling like my skin was on fire and crawling when he was in my presence, because I wasn't used to not only a man, but my DNA being in the same room and being set off in my body in a way that it wasn't never before.
Correct.
I was willing to press past all of that, and I was willing to have that relationship. And some of you have to step out and make your own decision that you need something he has. And you can tell me all day, you can't miss what you never had. And, you know, I ain't missing nothing. Oh, you're missing everything. You're missing the whole part of yourself right now, because you have not decided to step out and get to know who this person is outside of the narrative that you've been told. And there can be a lot of people who reinforce that narrative, even his sisters and his brothers and whoever else, because I've heard those stories. It's up to you to learn who he is. And I'm not talking about learning that he ain't a piece of, you know, or he's this and that. There is a part of you that is locked in this man. And until you get to know him, you can't unlock it in yourself. Point blank, period. And go ahead.
It's ownership. I had to own my own relation. I had to own who I was, number one. And I want to share this because I don't want this to miss on the people that's watching this. That moment I told you about, sitting in the car with, you know, at my job with him and having that conversation, and the reason that stood out for me the most is because that was the day that I said to myself, I forgive my dad. And even at that point of forgiveness, like, it still requires work, right? To build a relationship. But it was at that moment that I said, I'm not going to hold this against him. Like, I forgive you, right? Because I need you.
Because I need you. There is look, one of the things that I had resolved in my heart before even going to meet my father was, whatever I get from this is more than what I originally had.
Correct.
Because of that, I need to push this. I need to force my way into this situation. I've told the story before, where after meeting my dad and getting to know him and doing the DNA test and making sure he is my daddy, all of those things, I wrote my father a letter and was like, you know what? I'm going to need to pause this relationship. You're confusing everything in my life, everything in my circle. And I don't want this relationship because you're throwing everything off. Even my relationship with God, you're throwing off. Because like you said, there's this lack of grace. We grew up with bonus parents, and then God is our father. So there's this perfect God that we're used to fathering us. And then you get this imperfect daddy and you are calling him on all his stuff. And it's like, he needs grace because number one, he's human and he's just as nervous as you are. And I want you to talk about the man that you were and how this has created the man that you are, meaning the ups and downs and the challenges that you faced. And let's just be honest. Mom didn't tell it. I'm not going to say the other word. Mom didn't tell the whole truth. So now what's your lens when it comes to that as a man, knowing that the person you put on a pedestal could lie to you? I hate to say it. I hate to say the L word like that. It's a bad word when it comes to mom.
It's even as a man, it's like the times I would look in the mirror during those periods of reconciliation with my dad, and I didn't see myself, but I would still see that little boy that was still crying out for my dad, right? And so, that's a mind trip on somebody. I'm like, look, I'm out here, at this particular stage of my life. I'm in administration. I'm out here making deals and kicking butt and like just excelling, like high achieving, right? Because again, my motivation, right? So every 2 years, I would literally be in a different role, higher role, and I would steadily be climbing at the same time, like missing this piece of me, and then trying to figure out and navigate what am I supposed to do as a husband, as now a father. I have 2 amazing boys, right? Because again, I'm gonna show my dad how to be a good father. But the greatest thing, that period while he was, sick, like him having time with my boys. So still to this day, like my youngest is like, granddad, where's granddad? My oldest, of course, he's like, look, he said, granddad's not here anymore, but granddad still loves you. Right. But it was a while where it was a while I wasn't even comfortable with him having a relationship with my boys. That's how crazy stuff was, because I wasn't sure if I could trust him, right, with them. So I'm just trying to get. There's so many dynamics of this, and so as a man, kind of come up in this space, you're trying to, exert, power and influence. You're trying to do all these things that you think, to be in control, when instead you're really, scared and not sure exactly what to do. And to be honest with you, like a lot of this stuff doesn't get worked out, and it can't get worked out. And I'm gonna tell you what kind of really helped me was after my father passed. Like, this is the crazy part. So you can imagine. So my entire motivation and existence for my life and career was based on this. Again, not being like this. Well, this is no longer a threat to me, right? This is no longer an issue anymore. This is now my father. So now there's healing. But what happened to my motivation? What happened to my drive? What happened to this power? How do I keep going? Like, I started seeing myself diminishing. Because I had no, there was nothing that I could hold on to say, this is what's pushing you forward. This is what's driving you. It wasn't even my boys. It wasn't like none of that stuff. And I didn't even realize it. And I started to find myself, in this space where, I was stressed and felt like I was having, I thought it was maybe just grief. And so I was like, you know what? Maybe I haven't fully grieved. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna go see a therapist, right? I'm gonna go through this grieving process, because grief is different from mental health, right? No, but how we want to color it. Yeah. So I was like, maybe I'm still grieving. Let me go see how it help me kind of process this grief. Now, even that was a big step for me, because I've never done that before. And it was in that place where the therapist was like, it didn't take long. We're in these sessions, and she's like, oh my God, like, wow, it's amazing. And then she's like, Keith, have you ever been diagnosed with depression? It's like, what? It's like,
I'm happy. I smile.
Right?
I'm good.
Like, so I just thought like I'm a chief operating officer. I've traveled all over. No, but come on. And needless to say, I stopped going to see her. Right? I was like, dude, come on.
You're not the only one who does that.
Yeah,
You do that all the time. Yeah.
I stopped. I had all these goals that I set for myself even when I was in college. I knew there were like 3 big things I wanted to do. Of course, go to grad school, but I was like, I want to be a college professor. I want to be a college president, and then I want to spend my life traveling and impacting people and empowering people's life. Right? I want to pour into people. I knew that's what I wanted to do, and so. God started pushing that thing. Like I said, as soon as I finished grad school, 25, I'm a college professor, right? I started working my way up to be a college president. All the college president training programs and leadership for this, that, and the other. And, so I'm chief operating officer, like I'm there. And I'm there and I'm absolutely miserable. Like I'm falling apart.
You're being diagnosed as depressed.
For the period of time I was there, talk about being a man, like I was trying to figure out how can I do what I'm actually called to do. Like my father would always say, like, Keith, like, God has something amazing for you. It's only for you, right? And that is uniquely gifted to you. And it has always been how you create relationships and build and impact and inspire people. Like, like people, you touch people. And I knew that. But I was too afraid to jump. My father was like, Keith, don't be afraid. I still hear his voice telling me that. And so, but I was afraid then, because here I am. Now I've achieved success, right? I've achieved the pinnacle of what I'm supposed to. I'm married, I got a great house, kids, this, that, and the other, and I'm miserable. And I'm too afraid to leave. Because if I leave, then everything that I created out of this motivation, I don't know what I can do. And I'll tell you the saving grace, because I would ask God, I was like, God, show me how to get out of here. And I promise you, like I see them now, there were so many off ramps that I could have got off on.
You're like, detour. You created your own.
Right. I'm like, no, I'm gonna stay in the far left lane. I'm not getting, I'm not gonna get over. Right. And the only way that I got out of it was God said, okay, here's what we're gonna do, because you've been asking to get out of here. So I'm gonna lay you off. So I got laid off.
Wait, because you said so much, and I need to pause you right there, because many do not recognize that when they're asking for the purpose, they're asking for the answer, it doesn't come in a beautiful basket with great books and all of it comes in some type of catastrophe, some type of chaos, some type of laying off, firing, company closing. It's all of these things that's pushing you in that direction. But because you tend to be tied to, your identity is so tied to what you do at times, you can't get off the off ramp, right? And also your identity, Keith. And I don't believe you're the only one. I talk about people being motivated by this. I'm gonna prove you wrong on these negative statistics concerning fatherlessness. And overachieving is a negative statistic concerning fatherlessness. So you are proving my point when it comes to that. So mamas, please continue to listen to that. But
my identity was in I found identity in my job. Remember, I was that kid with no identity.
Yeah.
And so any identity I found, I literally attached and I wouldn't let go.
Right. And
because if I let go, I would lose them. Why? Because
who am I?
Right. So who am I? Yeah.
Your identity was also tied to the dysfunction of your upbringing. But now that's been blown out of the water, and now you don't know what to do. Like, now you're confused. And I can tell you, y'all, he went through a journey. He gets fired. I'm gonna let him tell that story. But Keith is now speaking, motivational speaking about his very journey. That's what he gets to do now, because God opened that door for him. Well, what was that between? Because I want to get you off of here because you got to get some family time. I'm gonna give us 10 more minutes in this conversation.
I'm gonna wrap it up for you, man. Yeah.
Because I could do this all night, and I'm not going to.
I can too.
Yeah, right. What's it like going from I'm now laid off to where you are now? What does this journey look like?
Yeah. So, knowing when I got laid off, like I already knew it was like this was the greatest thing that could have happened to me. I knew that in my mind. I knew that physically, but like mentally, I didn't catch up to it. And I was like, okay, let me. I was like, well, take a couple months off, a few months off, or whatever, and just you have to kind of again divorce yourself. You're broken, right? Your identity is attached to this person. I guess it would be somewhat like divorce, real divorce or whatever. But what I found myself is I found myself literally laying in the bed, right, or on the couch, not being able to get up. And I've created all these great relationships all around the country with people, presidents, and I can pick up my phone and call a president just about every state, right? And or some leader in every state, and it was like, Keith, I got you, whatever you need. But nothing that came up, like nothing materialized. Like every door that I thought would open, God was like, no, you've been saying this is what you want to do, right? And everything has been shut. And so it's like everything else I've been shifting, but I was so afraid still. And so let me tell you, I literally sat that 3 months turned into 6 months, and I knew something was wrong, and then it turned to almost a year. Now I thank God, like He sustained us. I wasn't working, right? But we didn't miss a beat, right? And I tell you this, at this particular point, like I'm in full-blown depression. I was like, I need help. And I realized that. And that was the hardest thing I did, but now looking back, it's the strongest thing I did. I said, I need help. Why? Because I know there's so much that I don't understand that I need to unpack. And so I went and got help, and through therapy, through all of this kind of stuff, to allow myself to unpack a lot of the baggage and understand so much. I went through even like a group intensive group therapy piece, and it was so weird because I'm in this session, I'm in this group therapy session with people with all kinds of issues. I'm like, I'm not even supposed to be here, right? That's you guys. But
I got an MBA. What am I doing in here?
Yeah. But what was supposed to be 2 weeks turned into 8 weeks for me. And even during that time, I'm in this group session, like I'm in there again, affirming what I'm actually supposed to do in my own life. Like I'm in there helping everybody else out, even though my own issues are crazy. Everybody else is getting like walking out. Like the therapist will literally be like, I'll tell the other therapist, don't worry, let Keith handle it. Like people thought I worked there. Right? Like helping people shift and then take action, right?
Yeah.
To change the paradigm and like stuff it was easy for me, but it was hard for me to do with my own stuff. And so I would tell you what really broke it all down for me. It's one question. I usually ask folks when I speak, I say, if I had to ask one question of you and I want you to really think about what the answer would be. So the question is really an I am kind of statement. So it's like, such and such, I am because blank. So I'll ask this question because it really plays into what we're talking about, fatherless sons.
Yes.
The question is, the most negative thought that I think about myself is that I am what? Right? The most negative thought I think about myself is that I am blank. Now, you answer that question, I'll just tell you mine. The answer to that question for me was failure. And when I said that to my therapist, she asked me a whole bunch of other questions that literally kind of all corresponded with that first thing. Yeah, like she started big. Yeah. Oh man, she gave like she started peeling that onion back big time. And before I knew it, like I would answer, and I would notice my body. I was literally like, my body was leaning over, and before I knew it, at the last question, my head was literally in between my legs, and the floor was wet with tears. And she's looking like her mouth is wide open, like, oh my God. And she said, and what killed me was, she said, she asked me, she said, whose voice do you hear when you said that to yourself? And I paused. I didn't want to say it at the time, but I told her later. I was like, it was my mom. It's my mom's voice.
Let me say this to you, because one of the girls on Healing Tuesday said, we leave our mothers' homes, but we take their voices with us.
It's my mom's voice.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother would never call me a failure. But the person that she, right, that guy, that one, right, I internalized all of that my entire life. She said, you realize all the things you've done in your life at this age? Like, anybody would be like, oh, like, you crazy. How could you even think this about yourself? But that was a limiting belief that I had about myself that so many of you guys carry too, right? But we don't even know it. And it's been holding us back for so long. And when I say, it was like, are you kidding me right now? Failure. It was stuff like failure. It was like coward. It was like fraud. It was like all these different, terms, right? It was all these different. Oh man!
Come on, somebody!
Yeah.
I better go look it up. I'm telling you.
Yeah, all the things that I associated with my father at that stage, that I internalized through the stories that I heard from him.
Yeah.
And they stay with me. And when I finished, it was interesting because, and to this day, I still do theory. And let me just say this, and I get it. There's not a lot of us Black men, like, we need that. Like, we need that healing. I get it. It's the hardest thing in the world to do sometimes is to go get help. I promise you, but it is the strongest thing you can do. Because if you can heal, like, you can literally change anything that is going on. Your entire environment can shift. Like there's just some things that I just don't tolerate anymore.
Yep. Because you know who you are.
Because I know who I am. And I don't have to fall.
And it came.
I don't have to fall back into these patterns anymore.
Yeah, it came from here. God brought that, then your father cultivated it. Your father brought the fertilizer to nurture it. And that's the part we miss all the time. We miss all the time.
So to help wrap this up in a pretty bow, maybe.
It doesn't have to be pretty.
It's in those moments where you finally have a breakthrough. And it was like, okay, it was one after the next, right? It was like my health started failing, my mental health started failing. And it was at a place where I was like, all right, God, I can't do this by myself anymore. Like, you know what I want to do. Just show me how you want me to do this. And I promise you, that same day I said this, no lie. I had been literally staying in my bed for almost a year, only going to like therapy when I had to, and come right back and still kind of in that space. Because when you're in depression, like that's real.
Yeah.
And that's not something. My father suffered from depression. And again, when you understand it, it shifts everything. When you understand the space that people are in, and we'll talk about, maybe we have to come back. We can talk about depression one day. We can talk about like
even whatever it was that you said he got caught up in, and drugs and stuff was involved. That could have even been him self-medicating. Drugs, alcohol run deep in. I won't say Black people in relationships, especially when we're in dysfunctional things, and then we self-medicate and it becomes addiction.
Yeah,
becomes addiction.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna leave, but you keep going. I'm gonna say that and keep it.
No, you're right. So that day, a good buddy of mine, like I said, I went to the doctor, and the doctor was like, Keith, like, you're this close to diabetes, and like your levels are so high, like you can literally die in my office like right now. Like that's how I just went down, completely disconnected from everybody that was around me. And people asked me to go out. I didn't feel like it. And because I didn't feel like it, I felt bad. And then I look in the mirror, and because I wasn't in the shape that I used to be in, I would be even more disgusted and shamed. And now that I'm diagnosed with depression and anxiety, all this other stuff, that's even a bigger shame. I don't want nobody to really know, because I'm still trying to figure. It's crazy, the cycles. But that same day I said, God, I can't do this. Like, I got a phone call from a good friend of mine, and he's a trainer. And he was like, it just out of the blue. I haven't talked to him in like literally almost a year. And he's the only person I actually told what was going on with my job. But he called me out the blue. He was like, Keith. I said, what's up, man? He said, are you fat? I said, are you for real? I was. I was really out of shape. But only he can say that. He's the only guy that can do this. And he was like, Keith, meet me at Stone Mountain. Let's just go walk. Let's talk. Let's talk about what's going on. And we walked around the mountain 5 miles just talking. And I shared with him. He was the first person I shared outside of my family what was going on, right? Completely shared. And it was so healing in that sense. And I was like, Ernest, listen, man, if you can help me get my body right, I know I can start shifting my mindset. Ooh. Right. And so he was like, I got you, let's do this. Right. So 60 days, I was like 30 pounds down, like this, because again, shift. Now, when he called, that was one thing. The very next day, I got a call from another friend of mine who was in the space that I wanted to be in as a speaker and a coach and as a trainer, and someone was out there impacting lives. And he sent me a message, so crazy on Facebook, like, listen, Keith, I'm in Atlanta. I'm doing this workshop, man. Would love you to come through. It was really a boot camp to kind of help people get into this industry, into this field. It was like, again, the next day. And I was like, I would love to. I was excited. And then I looked at the price tag. It was like $4,000 for the workshop for the weekend. I was like, I ain't been working in a year. Like, I got it, but I ain't got it. But I can't. Right. Like, I would love to. And he was like, Keith, he's my frat brother, right? He's like, Keith,
my husband, if he's on here, he gonna boo you all day.
Yeah. Hey.
James is down here, and he throwing up signs, Mark. He throwing up them gang signs. My husband is an alpha phi alpha, so
look, my baby brother now too. Y'all make mistakes. So I still love him. We're good. But he was like, Keith. He said, man, if you want to come. So I shifted my entire weekend. I was there, and it literally, again, it was like that one thing, then this, and then he was like, listen, I'm going out to California. I want you to come with me. Got this big seminar and such and such. So I flew out to San Diego. I was like, you know what? No, I'm going. Flew out to San Diego, and it was crazy because that was like the first time like I actually went and did something for me that was not like job related, like for me, which also is something. It's another story for me, right? Understanding my worth and like going after what
and your purpose.
Right? Yeah. And it lit a fire under me when I got that. Like this is always who I was supposed to be. I've been doing it for years, but now in this space where I'm doing it for me.
Yeah.
And at the end of last year, I was writing and I get all these epiphanies, and it was like 3 a.m. in the morning is like when God's like he's sending stuff to me at 3 a.m. It's crazy, like literally.
Oh, there's a reason for that, but we won't go there tonight.
Yeah, we won't go there tonight. But this concept around empowerment and then the empowerment lab. What is this? What is that? And creating this company that will help shift and focus people. Well, what do I call this company? And I named it the RS Empowerment Group. RS, Rodney Sagers.
Oh, so the name is in there now. That's a whole evolution in itself.
And here's the thing. It's my grandfather, Richard Sagers, my dad, Rodney Sagers. I'm Rodney Sagers, and my son is also Richard Sagers. So it's a generational kind of thing. And I stepped out and I started doing all this stuff. And I'll just say this is when you know what your purpose is And whether it's purpose or whether we're talking about relationships with our fathers or whatever the case may be, if you don't go all in, you'll always ask, what if?
Yeah.
You have to go all in. It wasn't until I went all in that stuff started to shift. Like everything started to line up. And I started watching how, again, people started coming in my life and started meeting new people, you know, like Dr. Torri, you know, just like out the blue, right?
You met
Out
2
the
weeks
blue.
ago. Well, we met
Right.
before that, honestly. We were introduced via Instagram by attorney Makeda Bryant. And I'm like, I'll see you in a minute. Give me a second. I'm dealing with some stuff. We talked on the phone literally 2 weeks ago. But there were things about your journey that we did talk about that I was like, nah, he needs to be on this week. It's him this week. I was happy about other people, but I was like, it's Keith. And the reason is this, because Keith, we're talking about your successes now, but it took a lot for you to really get there. We're not talking about the successes and the titles and the career and all of that. We're talking about the internal inner peace success that you have now been able to find. But it took a whole lot of stuff you had to get through that you should have never had to go through.
That's correct.
There's a lot of stuff you had to get through that you never should have gone through. It is very important that parents overcome their struggles, their traumas, the dramas that they go through, so that we as their children don't have to.
Yeah.
But
sorry, I get more questions or ask for advice around relationships and marriage, and I just tell people this, and specifically I tell it from the standpoint of what it means from a child's perspective. But I say there's two things I would tell you. You think about getting married or whatever case may be, or a relationship, like before, like love yourself enough to go get help. Like even if you don't think so, like there's things. If you're Black, you got some dysfunction. I hate to like say it like this, but like there's just stuff that goes on in our lives and that we've taken on.
Yeah,
baggage that we picked up, right? And, correct. Like unpack that first, because you need to really understand who you are as a person.
Yeah.
Love yourself enough, and then, you know, looking at a situation that you go into from a relationship or marriage perspective, whatever. You're not marrying that person, you're marrying whatever they came out of. And you have to be very careful about that, because you also, whatever you produce out of that relationship, again, you start a cycle.
Yeah.
And you have to be honest with yourself enough to say, you know what, I'm not going to allow this. But if I'm in it, you have kids, mothers are watching, like, don't feel embarrassed to take your child to a child psychologist to say, hey, just to unpack some stuff. Because my son is extremely smart, but I was extremely smart.
Right.
But I cared a lot of stuff that I wish I could have unpacked as a child. Like, your child needs that. And if you don't give it to them, how selfish are you? So I'm telling you now, I'm putting you up on game, like, do that.
Yeah.
Because you have to protect them. That's your job, right?
That's the way that you think protection is.
Thank you. Not the way you think.
Yeah.
Protecting them means giving them the healing and the structure. All the things that you're probably afraid of is what they need to unpack. The stuff that you're afraid to speak on, the stuff that you're afraid to unpack for yourself, is the stuff that I promise you your kids are impacted by.
Yep.
So Torri, you know, on that note, man, like, look, I'm grateful for this time with you. I hope I said some stuff that, you know, help some people out.
Trust me, you said enough stuff that some people got on and got off. They'll come back in the midnight hour at 3 a.m. and be watching this. I already know how they're going to do this, because it's not easy. And I'm going to do a few watch parties first thing in the morning, and they're going to watch this. But I need you to know that I thank you for your authenticity and your genuineness and the truth that you were able to speak concerning all forms of ownership, not just your own, but in your dad's, but also a place where our mothers have to own it. And I want to speak to those in a moment, what they need to do. But Keith, tell people where they can find you and talk to you and maybe get some of your services that you provide.
Yeah, absolutely. God, of course, you can find me on social media. Instagram, Keith Sagers, 1911. Facebook, Keith Sagers. LinkedIn, Keith Sagers, the same thing. And I would love for you to join the Empowerment Lab group. It's my online community. As a matter of fact, if you're listening, what I want to do is, I just want to give a free gift to everybody.
Okay.
If you go on my website, keepsakers.com, I want to give you what I call the main ingredient. It's that piece that people are missing that helps them really achieve what they're looking to achieve in life, to hit their goals and whatever it is they want with absolute certainty. So whether it's a relationship, whether it's, professionally, personally, whatever that is, understand that main ingredient that's going to drive you. So I want to give that gift to your audience, and love the dialogue. So you can connect with me there.
Put that up there so they can see it.
Awesome.
Yeah, so they can see it and definitely be in a place where they can get it. I want to say this before I get off of here. You definitely, let me put this here. People were like, this was good. Alfonso said, great show. So people were listening. They were in the cut, trust me, but they were listening. I know they were because I know my numbers and I know who I get. But I want to say this, there's different dynamics here. I want to say to every single mom, I need you to hear Chris. Keith, I need you to hear Keith's heart and what he's been dealing with. And I want you to recognize that children are saying things that maybe you don't hear. And you need to take hold of what he said by getting your children into therapy. When their father isn't present, they are not okay, although they seem okay. Therapy, they are not, boy or girl. Don't put it just on the boys. Boys or girls, they're not okay. They need therapy. They're going to need that help. And those tools will be carried into their adult life. Trust me, I'm living proof of therapy at 12 that I now carry those tools and teach other people. I am not a therapist, but I swear by, you need a therapist and a coach. And then the other part is fathers. I need you, when you are reunited with your children, I need you to have the patience like Keith was talking about his father had. His father had the patience to wait. He didn't just jump in there and tell him everything that his mother did that was wrong or that was a lie or whatever it was. You have to heal your part of the journey even to be reunited. And that's a tough place for men to be in, especially when you want to be present. And I need you to have patience once they're around. Sometimes you're just going to be able to sit in the room with them. Sometimes you don't get to say anything. Sometimes it's a quick in and out, like I had multiple times, because that is a very intense moment for a child who hasn't had you in their lives. And then when it comes to fatherless sons and daughters, I need you to press the button and call. I need you to send the email, because your father may be too scared. He may be ashamed and guilty, and it becomes your responsibility to then go find the other part of you that you're missing. He is the missing link. And for those of you who are crying out for your purpose, you have to find him in order to unlock that part of you that has still been locked up and held in bondage. So I am grateful for this time with Keith and this conversation that we've had. I am Dr. Torri J, and I'm the founder and CEO of this amazing organization, the Fatherless Generation Foundation. And I look forward to talking to more of you at a later date. So you guys have a great night, and we'll talk soon. Thank you so much, Keith.
Thank you, Torri. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.